Côte de Bruxelles and a consultant for the UN Development Program from 2022 to 2024. In 2023, she founded the Field Research Consulting, which is a consultancy that trains and coaches academics and professionals working on sensitive topics in challenging environments. She has worked on numerous other projects, and it is my great pleasure to welcome moderator Gabrielle White and Dr. Ellen Van Dam to the stage to lead this workshop.
Thank you so much, Josephine, for the wonderful introduction. I am Gabrielle White, and I am a Program and Impact Associate with the International Organization of Youth. First of all, thank you all so much for coming. I'm very excited to have you all here to welcome you with the wonderful Dr. Van Dam. To give a brief overview of what we're going to go through today, it's going to be a presentation, and there's going to be a few exercises throughout and time for questions. And so at the end, we'll also have a few minutes for questions, but at the beginning, we're going to have Dr. Van Dam go through her presentation, and we're going to have some skill building workshop exercises. Overall, we're really excited to have you all here, and I am pleased to welcome Dr. Ellen Van Dam to the stage.
Thank you very much for the introductions. Before I'm starting, I want to know, does somebody not have anything to write or write on? So is somebody lacking a pen or paper? Because we're going to distribute pens and paper for those who need them. Yeah, raise your hand if you need pens and paper. Thank you. So I will go ahead and start. If at any point in time you have a question, feel free to pose it immediately, or if not, there will also be extra time at the end. So, building strategic alliances, effective networking, and partnerships. I will go a little bit through my pathway in my career, highlighting a couple of things that I think are most interesting for people here. A small note beforehand, I am not a trust fund baby. I was able to apply for a lot of scholarships. That being said, I grew up in Belgium, which is a huge privilege. I realized once I moved out of Belgium, because primary and secondary school is as good as free. My university, that was in the top 50 universities, I only paid €500 a year. So just a small context, which I think is a big difference for many other countries, especially the USA, where you kind of need to be rich or indebt yourself to just have a normal education. So those side notes. Where I will start with some building blocks, and I will point out some choices and serendipities. Because very often when I go to talks and see people, I think like, oh my God, wow, they had such a linear path. They really knew what they were doing. But then when I was on my own path, I knew that, like, yes, some things were deliberate choices, but some things just happened to appear on my path. The first thing I would say was the AFS intercultural exchange year I did after high school. It was a choice to do an AFS here. The serendipity was that I was not fully able to choose the country where I was going to. And I was sent to Honduras, Central America. So I did not know anything about Honduras at the time, so that definitely changed a lot for me in my career. Main reason why I wanted to do an AFS here was to learn about different cultures, learn Spanish, and just be away from my own country. Then in university, I started studying criminology, and very soon on, I joined the United Nations Youth Association, which I think might be familiar to many of you. And I had several roles in there. I first just joined as a member, but then I really tried to put in my work. And then when the chapter leader, like president or vice president, had to step down, they asked me if I wanted to take a level. And I think during that period, because I was involved with them for about 4 years, I would say, I really had a lot of opportunities meeting ambassadors, people working at the UN, participating in Model United Nations. I was also invited to do a human rights work at the Geneva headquarters. So yeah, I would say like that definitely on the UN level gave me a lot of opportunities. Then I had to do a traineeship for my studies, and the choice was like I wanted to do an international traineeship, not a traineeship in my own country. Then the serendipity again, through an acquaintance, I was able to find a place in South Africa, which is called Educo Africa, where I was able to do my traineeship. In my master's, I did thesis research in Central America, did an internship at Social Science Research Council, and then I kind of had to like choose, like, do I continue this path of UN, international organizations, or do I continue to go ahead in academia? I was full on going for the international organizations, 100%. And I even, like, my first job was at the United Nations Association in Flanders in Belgium. But then something happened. My MA supervisor, he was like, why don't you think about a PhD? And I was like, what? Like, no way. Like, how would I ever like get funding for that? Now it happened that I was only employed half-time with UNA, and my supervisor at the time, he gave me another part-time job. And during that job, I actually applied for funding, and I did get a 4-year scholarship. And I didn't have the best time at my UNA job, unfortunately, because of the boss at the time. And I was also, and I'm going to be very honest, a bit disillusioned by the UN. Like, I went to the Geneva headquarters, went to the UN headquarters in New York. And, you know, like, I was like young, I wanted to like change the world or whatever. And I found like a lot of people at those headquarters were maybe there for personal reasons, like a lot focusing on networking, like for their own career. And so it like a little bit disillusioned me. That being said, I obviously we need those people in those like higher positions. Not everybody can be in the field. But so at that point, I shifted a bit and I went for the PhD. Again, this opened a lot of doors for me because I had a 4-year scholarship, so I could fully for 4 years focus on my research. I could apply for extra scholarships to go to conferences, to seminars. I did visiting research stays, among which at UC Irvine, which is here close by. So then I had contacts for later on here at UCLA. Throughout that period, I also volunteered at several organizations in Belgium, Gothe Belga, Amnesty International. And then I did a Fulbright year here at UCLA. So I had contacts already at UCLA, so I was invited to do my Fulbright year here at this Center for the Study of International Migration. And then it shifted again. So it's very interesting. I was like, yeah, it's full on the academic path. And then, of course, if you do postdocs and Fulbright, because the Fulbright was a postdoc. And I did a keynote speech at like a very big conference in Europe. And so everybody was expecting that I would just continue that path. And then I came here and I was like, I get a bit disillusioned. And I shifted again. And again, a bit like serendipity, I would say, for personal reasons, I had to shift. And given the context that I had built up throughout my career, at one point I received an invitation or like an email from United Nations Development Program in El Salvador asking, they were like, hey, we need an expert. So as I was introduced, I did my research on women and gangs in Central America, and they said we need an expert on women and gangs and like people who have spent time in prison in Central America, which you like, want to come and work on our project. So that's what I did in the past couple of years. Throughout that project, the University for Peace was also involved because they set up a training for people working in that area, and I gave a couple of workshops. I'm going to stay here. I gave a couple of workshops to basically train people to work with people who have spent time in prison. Because obviously, for me as a criminologist, I've worked with people who spent time in prison, who have committed crimes, all sorts of. So I'm very used to that, but obviously a lot of people are not used to that, and there are a lot of prejudices, stigmas towards people who have spent time in prison. And I specifically say who has spent time in prison because not everybody who has spent time in prison has necessarily committed a crime. That's a different discussion. And So finally, I ended up establishing field research coaching, where I train both practitioners in the field who work on sensitive topics or in at-risk areas, but also researchers, because a lot of academics get traumatized by their research over and over again because they work on very sensitive topics and they think like, oh, but I cannot feel this way because I need to do this for my research, for my work, or like I'm helping other people. And so like very highly not recognizing their own feelings, hence ending up in like traumas or burnouts or whatever. And so I further specialized. I'm a first aid mental health trainer and also a yoga teacher. So I take those aspects for my field research coaching. So you can already like grab your pens and paper. I want you to think about like the following questions. What are your own building blocks? And I see we're definitely here from various places and maybe at various stages of our careers, but like for a second, think of what your own building blocks are. And can you identify where the choices were and where the serendipities were? And what your next step might be. And I will stare at you until everybody is writing. If somebody came in and they don't have a pen or paper to write on, please raise your hand. We have pens and paper.
I just talk. Oh, okay. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so very much for that background. It was really very enlightening, especially connecting the serendipities in life. I was born in foster care in LA County. My mother gave me up into when I was born. But along the way, I was placed within an unrelated family and actually had a very wonderful foster care experience, which not, there are many out there that never get told. But in being raised in a large family, because it was a foster home, and then later on I was adopted, we were always, my mother was always asking us to go and help people in the neighborhood. Go and clean out Mrs. Garcia's garage, or help in the garden with another family down the street. And so service became a good part of my life at a very early time, and that was a really important building block for me. Was not only for my own growing up, but also seeing community and also relating to community. And it was actually a very diverse community growing up in East Los Angeles at that time. Later on, I ended up in a serendipitous mode. I ended up being recruited following my college. Actually, I graduated here in 1975 with a BA in poli-sci. But in all of that, I continued while I was here. Even I got in a place where I was able to form with a group of others a nonprofit that helped stop the gang killings on this west side between 5 different neighborhoods. And that was just a form of service of just seeing the need. And not that we were, we provided an infrastructure where the community actually was able to come forward, and parts of the others that helped create this nonprofit called Barrios Unidos, which still exists today, actually. But what we did was we got mothers whose children or young people, their sons and daughters were involved in gang violence, and some had been killed. So we ended up taking the mothers from one particular gang to the neighborhood of another gang, and we had a talk out. And then the daughters started coming, and we visited all the different parts, sharing those stories. Later on, I got recruited into the Department of Probation. And so I spent some county service as an LA County Department of Probation officer, working in the camps. And found, of course, that the cycle that we talk about breaking, that many of the youth that I was now supervising as a deputy probation officer also had come out of foster care. From there, another serendipitous move was then I learned that the Department of Corrections for the state of California was now recruiting social workers. And as a result, I ended up going to work for the Department of Corrections as a parole agent, and found that many of the men and women coming out of state prison, were also had foster care jackets, as we call them. The majority of my county career, though, actually got spent in the LA County Department of Children and Family Services. So now I was actually a social worker, and later on became a supervisor. During the 80s, during a lot of, I had a caseload of 128 kids. In South Central, as a supervisor, I had 1,400 cases in my unit at that time. But, in the building blocks that continue to build for me this life now of service, I was able to not only understand and sympathize, but I could empathize. Having grown up in the system and then seeing my parents who adopted me and what they were doing as they were reaching out to take other people's children and give them a good life as well. So in that small community of what we call family, I learned some fundamental values that have been vital, essential, and actually necessary for why it is I still live today and what I do in service. Today through my own walk of many foster care children, also ended up involved with drugs and alcohol, like many of our youth do in many places around the world, actually. And today I have 21 years being clean and sober. But I followed a path that led me in the serendipitous arena by surrendering to a power greater than myself. And in a belief that I could do more I can do more than just for me, that I can do more to help change this world in whatever capacity that might be, small, large, or in between. It's that fire that was wakened up in me by my mother and my father, who actually, growing up playing baseball in East LA, my dad took a lot of kids off the street and took, at that time, lumberjacks and knives out of their hands and put baseball bats in mitts, and so those types of values, I've come to a place in my own spiritual journey today where I don't see them as serendipitous to some degree. I come to a place where in my own spiritual walk, there are no coincidences or accidents. If you open your heart and you give voice to your heart, and it's not just always the head talk, things happen. There is magic in this world. And I agree with Einstein's quote saying, you can live this life two ways. You can either live this life that there are no miracles in life, or you can live that every day is a miracle. And so with that, I've embraced that multi-dimensional, multi-realm, maybe spiritual aspect of knowing that I'm not only a two-legged human being, mind and body, but I'm also a spiritual being that's housed in this beautiful vessel we call the earth suit. And so, thank you.
thank you for many reasons for sharing that. And also, this is the next thing I was going to talk about. So I think you were able to read my mind. Because I highly agree, like other like building blocks are some necessary traits. And this is very personal. I have seen a lot of traits in my networking career, and this is what for me is important. I just listed them alphabetically, so there's no other importance. But for me, authenticity, whatever you are, like just that is the way you should show up. Curiosity, effort, flexibility, again with the serendipity, like we might have a certain idea, a certain goal in mind, but then like life brings us something else. Intercultural communication, and I put between brackets for an emphasis, listening, because yeah, I think we all, or in some countries and some cultures, we're very good at speaking, but maybe less good at listening. And I think that for me was like the biggest one. And I think where I learned that the most, because I had to, was moving to Honduras without speaking a word of Spanish. And then you start to listen not only to words, because I couldn't understand the words, but you also just learn a lot about body language. And that to me was like a very important lesson. Perseverance, self-reflexivity, cultivating community, which is another word that I learned, interestingly, only when I came to the US. Everybody, so for reference, with the US, I mean LA. I don't have much experience in the rest of the US. Everybody was talking about community, wanting to have community, or having found a community, or this and that. And I couldn't understand what they were talking about. Like, bear in mind, English is also not my first language, so I was thinking about community as other things. And it's a bit like, you know, like a fish in the ocean asking, what is water? Because I had grown up in Belgium, in a country like where the community is just there in everything. So I didn't realize it was there in everything until you move to a place where it is different and people are more searching for community. And probably one of the most important things, volunteering / giving. The giving, like really on a daily basis. I got where I am, and people would refer to me or vouch for me or whatever because of the giving, and not, I wasn't giving or volunteering with the purpose of like, oh, then I will be able to make a career. Like, no, it's just something you do. So, next writing exercise. Which traits, and you can also just like choose a couple or one, do you use in your work or in your network? And can you name one that you would like to develop more for your networking purposes? You get 2 minutes. I see people on their phones, I'm sure they're taking notes, yes. I just do that, I'm used to like running workshops and then people like immediately go to their phone to check Instagram. Like, you should yeah. I'm kidding. Okay, I think, are we good on that one? Because we will take a bit more time, especially for the last one. No, I see somebody saying no. Go ahead, take your time. I can also like talk a bit slower. And I think why I was mentioning those traits is, and I'm sure everybody in this room can relate to it because you are all in international spaces, you meet a lot of people. And then you meet a lot of people that do the networking purely for the networking. And yeah, I think definitely a negative trait of Belgians is we are in some way and for some reason taught to undersell ourselves. We will never oversell ourselves. So that is something that I've definitely started to learn here in the US, where people are very good at selling themselves. I'm like, oh wow, you all sound so amazing. So I'm definitely working on that. But then, yeah, like when I talk about authenticity and the giving, I think mostly, that's my way of networking. And I think, is it the next part? No, it's not the next part, but it will come. Yeah, if you go into a space and you purely go with the aim of like, I'm gonna like establish as big a network as I can, you will learn that that is not sustainable over time.
I found that listening is one of my,
Exactly, that's what I could hear, right?
Yeah.
What intercultural communication is
Yeah.
saying. Exactly, I fully agree. And some starting points also in our careers and in our pathways. What are our goals and dreams? I don't know about you, but like for me, I think growing up and being aware of all my privileges that I have, there were also like some privileges that I didn't have. And so when you do get the chance to do something, you're like, oh, I fully need to go for that. I need to grab every chance. And you're just on this train. And I think for a long time, I was like on this train of like doing my bachelor's, doing masters, so I can do another master's, so I get a scholarship for the PhD. And being on that train and then not standing still, like, is this aligning to my goals in life on a career level? But what are my like dreams in life, and how does because people very often talk about work-life balance, but okay, how does that look like, and what is it really that I want from this life? Because it's not only about work. Yeah, sure, especially living in a place like LA, you need to earn a lot of money to just be able to live normally, which is something I'm still battling with, because I don't want to have to earn that much money just to pay rent and food. But then are there maybe other aspects? Well, you have amazing weather. You like right by the ocean, which for me was definitely as a kid growing up in Belgium. Hell yeah, California for sure. So how can we balance that? And so my question to you, and take some time again to reflect on this and write this down. What is your long-term goal? This is one question. What are you most passionate about? Another question, which might be very different from your long-term goal on the work level. What gives you energy? Again, something very different. Energy, think of your well-being. What is it that gives you energy, that maintains your overall well-being? Again, I will give you a couple of minutes to think about that, to write that down.
And after you folks get some time to deliberate, if anyone wants to share and start a discussion, feel free. I'll come around with the mic and give you the space to speak.
I still have one more, like exercise, so don't speak too much because you have more work to do.
I don't want to monopolize the conversation here, so.
So think about long-term goal. Do I see a hand there? No, sorry. Long-term goal, something you're most passionate about, and what gives you energy. You have all those questions if you want to take a picture. So then talking about strategic networking. Again, think about the traits, authenticity, all of the traits that you bring into your networking. There's various ways to do the networking, and again, keeping in mind there's also cultural differences in networking that we have to adapt to. There's formal and informal networking, and for me personally, I do a lot of something that is on the border of both. Like even when I'm in a formal setting, say a conference or meeting up with people, I will try to also just have like informal conversations. What is happening in that person's life? Make more time to not just have like one coffee to like discuss like business or whatever, but also like really make time to listen to that person's story. So, and this might be a personal thing, like other people are maybe better. I think I'm just not good at like pure formal networking. Again, bearing in mind, I wasn't raised to sell myself properly, so I'm just better at informal conversations.
May I ask a question?
You can.
I'm wondering, when can you tell when formal versus informal approaches are appropriate?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I think, again, like partly is very culturally defined too. That's a very good question. Because like for me, it's just something you can sense a bit. I always try to bring in a bit a sense of humor in conversations and in networking, and you can sense whether that's appreciated or not, because that can loosen up conversations a bit. If you feel that that is not appreciated or that's not sensing, then then you're in like a formal and you just stick to the formal aspect. But yeah, I highly encourage the more informal part to just, because that is like people will remember the other things you say. Like when I, for example, and this is very random, I am a free diver, just nothing to do with my work. I do incorporate like some mental aspects that I use in freediving for my work. But talking about those things and asking other people about their hobbies and aspects, that has actually caused me some connections here at UCLA, a professor who is also a free diver. It's nothing to do with our jobs. But yeah, so I think trying to see the person behind the job will take you way longer than just purely being like, this is my CV, I am great, I am amazing, and you are great, so we should connect. So yeah, I can highly recommend that. Continuing relationships, yeah. So it's not just a one-off, I give you my business card and now we are in connection on LinkedIn. To the extent possible, and again, depending on in which formats you are, which opportunities you get. I took during my PhD with the scholarship all the opportunities I had to go to as many in-person events, bearing in mind this was pre-COVID, and activities as possible. I went to some very large conferences where there were thousands of people, which honestly speaking is not that great for networking. This space, it's amazing. I would say this is a great format for networking, even if it would be a little bit smaller. But it is by going through those conferences that you meet other people and you can find smaller scale places. I found smaller working groups, for example, working groups focusing specifically on gangs. And it is within those working groups that you will be able to establish a way stronger network, I would say. So that is also something that I can recommend. And so this will be our last reflections exercise for today, and then I'm opening it up. And we still have plenty of time. Then I'm opening it up for discussion, and feel free to also reflect on the previous questions. But so this one takes a bit longer, and I also use this one in the workshops that I give. First of all, who is already in your network? And think broad. Think back, for example, when I got my position of my traineeship in South Africa, this was just through a friend of my mom who happened to have worked there. So think broad of who is in your network and what is their role. And so I would say there's a difference also between the formal network on the work level, but then you have also what I call the circle of support. which is your circle that will support you throughout your whole career, throughout your whole work. In that circle of support, you have your friends, your family, direct colleagues, also your therapist, your coach, your mentor. They are all in your circle of support. And it is very important to also, I will not force you, but if you want to, I make the people that attend my workshops to really draw this circle of support. Because it is such a fulfilling feeling to see like, oh, these people are actually there for me. And I also make, and feel free to do this because we still have time, people really put a role. So if you say like, oh, my colleague Jessica is in my circle of support and her role is to listen when I went into prison and I had to talk to this person who like had a very rough time and that obviously affected me. And I'm like, oh, but I'm not sure if Jessica would want to listen to my story. And then I go to Jessica and I'll be like, hey, if this comes up, can you be the one that I can go to? So I would say like, even if you don't want to do this now, please write this exercise down to create your circle of support, visualize it, and put it above your desk or take a picture of it because we are in that era. So who's already in your network? What is their role? Name one connection you'd like to further develop. And this might be a person you're already connected to, but you would want to deepen that connection. And name one action you'll undertake to accomplish this. So I will give you about 5 minutes to do that. So please take some time to reflect on that. And then we will open the floor for questions, reflections. This exercise takes more than 5 minutes, so please take your full 5 minutes. Can I see some hands of people who already finished? Couple. Can I see some hands of people who need some more time? Either take note of the questions or take a picture. And we move on to the last slide. It just means that we're done with this one. I have a booth here at the patio, so please do feel free to step by. If you sign up to the newsletter, I have like a bunch of workshops coming up, some of them like also free workshops. We have the Fieldwork Buddy Network, which is open to everybody to join online. So yeah, we're now going to open the floor for questions, reflections. I have been asked to keep it short, like up to 2 minutes, so that everybody gets the opportunity to share something or say something. And I am very glad that you were all here. So please, raise your hands for whomever. Thank you.
I have a question about the Fulbright. I believe it was on one of the slides. I was wondering if you could talk about it a bit more, your experience with the Fulbright. I know recently in the US there has been some issues with funding and stuff like that. But I would be interested in doing a Fulbright in the future, so I'd love to hear your take about your experience.
Yeah. 100% you should go for Fulbright. So yeah, I can't speak of future of Fulbright because indeed we know there's some financial cuts and stuff, but you would also have to see in your own country how it's financially organized. Because for example, in Belgium pays half of the scholarship and the US pays half. So a bit depending on that, there might be more opportunities. I think, I did Fulbright when I was still on my academic career path. Fulbright was whenever I saw a speaker and oh, Fulbright alone, I was oh my God, they totally made it in their life. And so eventually I was encouraged by other Fulbright scholars to apply for it. And I applied for Fulbright and another postdoc to the US. And I'm gonna be very honest, at the time, for me, this was purely career oriented. Even though, yes, I was dreaming of California beaches and whatever, because I was living in gray, rainy Belgium. In all honesty, Belgians in general, I think Europeans have a lot of prejudices towards the US. So it's not I didn't have the American dream or whatever. So it was very career oriented for me, that choice. Now again, choices and serendipity. So because then COVID happened, I had to postpone it. And when I did come eventually to UCLA, which was in September 21, we were still a bit in COVID. So I always say my Fulbright experience with the university wasn't necessarily that great, just because not everybody was here. So on a networking level and career level, it was maybe not the greatest. And so this is, let's say, the university experience level, but then the Fulbright experience was amazing. So even though it is perceived as very prestigious, actually Fulbright does behave in a very family kind of way. Once you're in Fulbright, it's really a family. And also if you say, I want to apply to Fulbright, if you ask anybody else who has applied to Fulbright and got it, they will gladly help you or write a letter for you. I was really, shocked at actually how warm of a community it is and was. And also the person who organized Fulbright LA, she invited us to her house. She took us to basketball games and those kind of things. So, and you really meet people from all over the world and who do all kinds of things. Because yes, I am a criminologist, but one of my best friends from Fulbright, like she's a cinematographer. So it really, yeah, I can very highly recommend it. And for me, the whole process was a good experience. Like even the interviewing process was a good experience, which I cannot say of the other scholarship I applied to and didn't get. So yeah, I don't know if that, like also bearing in mind Fulbright, you have like several programs. So I did a postdoc program, but you have doctoral, you have journalist program. So you have to kind of like look into that depending on your country. But yeah, definitely go for it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Van Dan, for that insight. I have another question right over here.
Hi, my name is Sophia, and in your presentation, you talked about how it's important to like maintain relationships from people you've met through like networking events or like functions. And so, how do you recommend like maintaining those relationships, especially if the people you met don't live near you like geographically?
Mhm. No, that is of course a hard one, right? If you have the means, and especially again, if you're like in some sort of like doctoral program or whatever that you can apply to scholarships and you have means to travel to places. If that is not around, then that is also what like COVID taught us. Like we cannot travel. That's as simple as it is. I think for me, the most important thing was finding those smaller networks. So I form part of the Eurogang network, which is a network of gang researchers, basically from originally the US and Europe, but now it includes people from all over the world. And so being in that network, then even though when you cannot travel or when there are, for example, this year is the first year we're not hosting a workshop just because nobody has the funding for it, but you still stay in touch on like more, again, formal or informal ways, like working on certain projects together. And then, yeah, if you can travel like then to the bigger conferences or whatever, meeting up with those people outside of the purely academic sphere, I would say. And I think again through giving, like what is it that you can do for other people? Because even from a distance, you can give a lot. Like if somebody's working for a certain organization and they need some help like writing a report or whatever, or I mean, I'm not good at social media stuff, but maybe other people are, and then that is a way that you can also give and be like, hey, I can actually help you with your social media. So I would say like through that, you can definitely, and I have like some of my best friend colleagues, because again, I'm like way too informal probably for the job that I do, whom I've like talked to mostly for years over Zoom, because we met maybe right before COVID on Zoom, and that is how we met. And like then when you finally see each other, you already have a deeper connection. I think one way I also do writing groups, which I organize, and I just say like, hey, like that day I'm gonna write because I need to publish an article or whatever. Who wants to join? Who has also something to write on? And that is really fun because that's a way like I write with people from all over the world, and in between your writings, you're like just chit chat, and so that is like also it's kind of like finding those kind of ways. Thank you for that question, though.
Thank you so much. We have a question right over here.
Thank you. So my question is somewhat related to a personal experience of mine. And I don't know if this is a unique experience, but something I personally struggle with is whenever I meet someone that I believe can open a door for me and maybe land me an internship, help me bring an idea to life, I'm really scared of seeming like I'm only using that person to get something. So I really struggle with how do I present myself to them? How do I approach them? How do I give them my ideas without giving off that impression? Do you have any tips or recommendations for that? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a very good question. I very often encourage people to just voice that concern. Because say you might have a concern like towards me, if you're going to talk to me and you ask me about Fulbright or whatever, you might feel like, oh, she's going to think like I'm just talking to her about that. Because those are the voices going on in your mind, right? Where it's like, I think like, no, great, because I want people to do Fulbright, I want people to do IF. It's like, I love talking about that. So if you can, one of the practices I do a lot in like the workshops I give is, identifying and listening to those voices in our minds to then realize like we have our own voices, we have our own story, but the person like sitting next to us might have a completely different story, completely different experience. So, and this is a practice like that is useful in our whole life, like in relationships and whatever. So I would just voice that concern on the one hand, and also on the other hand, if you are genuinely interested in that person's work, then say so, and also see like how can you get involved again with the giving, like is there something you can do for them, or like some way that you can be involved in their work to really show like I am genuine, because that also shows that you are genuinely interested and not just fishing around for internships or whatever. So yeah, don't be scared to voice that, and just voice also in general. People don't know if you're looking for an internship or whatever unless you tell them, because I might be in a position that I know a lot of, for example, PhD scholarships, because that's my network. I constantly get emails of like, oh, we have a PhD scholarship for this or that. If I don't know that you are interested in that, then I cannot send it to you, or I cannot think of you. So that is also like, important, I would say. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for about 2 more questions. So anybody who would like to ask Dr. Van Dam?
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I was wondering, just adding on to the serendipity portion that you mentioned before, those opportunities can come in a very unanticipated manner, and sometimes you don't even realize that it's an opportunity of a lifetime, and it sort of just passes and it moves on. So I was wondering, how does seizing opportunities look like on a daily basis, and how do we know when to grasp those opportunities that might seem a little invisible? Thank you.
Yeah, no, good question. I think there's 2 aspects of that, or there might be many aspects. One is like, are you able to feel what it is you really want with your body? Because very often people like us, like in academia and international organizations, whatever, we are up here, we are like in our mind, like we are doing everything with this. So we kind of forget that we have a body. And so sometimes our body will knock on the door and give us a headache and be like, you're not doing a good job. We have some self-care to do here. So I would say like, identify if you are able to like sense, because very often your body will tell you what is good for you or not. And I know plenty of people who are just completely out of touch with their body, and they cannot. They're constantly like doubting, and they never make a choice just because they cannot feel what it is they really want. So that is one thing, and you need to identify for yourself if you are capable of feeling, of tapping into that. And then another thing is like, again, like talk about it with people. So try to find, and mentor sounds sometimes like a big word, but like even a colleague can be like, have a bit of a mentor role, so to say. Because sometimes, if we are all here because we are highly involved with our career, we want to do the best for the world and this and that. But sometimes we're so much on that train that we forget to stand still and like think like, okay, do I want to go this path or do I want to go that path? Yes, maybe for my career to like become like a famous whatever, that is a good thing. But is that also what eventually will contribute to my ultimate goal in life? And so I would say like definitely talking to people about that is a good idea. Because you might think, oh, should I do another unpaid internship to finally land a job at the UN? I would say like, no, first of all, they should pay you for your internship. And secondly, like, yes, is that really going to land you a job? And so I would say like really talk to people also about that. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much. We have time for one last question.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation and sharing your valuable experience for us. It's very important for us too. So I have a question, which is what's the top skills you gained when you attended these programs and exploring the networks? So could you mention about it? Thank you.
Yeah, good question. I think I learned the most and what was the most valuable for the rest of my career and life, even I would say, during my AFS year in Honduras. Even though I was very young, so I was 18, and you're gone for a whole year. And bear in mind, I had like only traveled on a plane once in my life, and I'd never left my continent or anything. But I learned so much because I could not speak the language. So I learned to listen to things that were not being said. And again, like the body language issue, and also because I wasn't traveling, there's a difference. You have traveling and traveling, right? Like I was not like going there with a mission, like, oh, I'm going to like change this culture or whatever. Like, no, you go there to like learn about the culture. And so it's a very different perspective. And I just learned so much. You learn so much about your own country and your own culture. And you're like, oh wow, like I thought that this was normal, quote unquote, and it's not. And I would say, yeah, I think speaking of like that intercultural communication, because you can follow courses on intercultural communication, but how much you really learn from that versus like really living in another place. And again, living in a way not of like trying to impose your own values and norms, but really living in a way of like, I'm going to learn from this place. And it can really be anywhere, I would say, just anywhere that it's not like not sending me to my neighboring country, France or whatever, like that's a bit too close, but anywhere that is at least a language that you don't speak, a culture that you really don't know about. I learned the most from that because, yeah, I think there's so much misunderstandings in the world just because, again, we have our own voices in our head, we have our own values, everything we carry with us. And we approach people from that perspective, not realizing that they come from a completely different perspective. They might have a completely different story going on. So that I think, and again, speaking of like pathways, yeah, for me, like at least like yoga has helped me a lot. And the mental practice. And again, I do free diving, which is diving without oxygen. The only way you do that is if you're like mentally like clear. If not, your mind goes like, oh my God, I need to breathe. And then you're not gonna go, of course. So yeah, that for me was, I think, the most important one. But yeah.
Thank you so much, all of you, for coming. Can we all please give a big round of applause to Dr. Rivera? Also, feel free to check out her collaboration booth in the back for her research consultant coaching. Please go out there and ask her any questions. And before we break for lunch, please go ahead and talk to her or network like she mentioned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.